Hello, this is Jessi Sletten from Empowering Postpartum, and welcome to the Spanglish World Networks on Zingo TV, channels 250 and 251. Please download both the Zingo TV app on all the respective app stores on iOS and Android devices. And while you download, make sure to rate and leave a comment. The app is free. Zingo TV is also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire and Fire TV sticks, Roku and Roku sticks, and on all smart TVs 2016 and forward. Welcome back, everyone. It has been a hot minute since we've had ourselves gathered here for Empowering Postpartum TV. For those of you who are tuning in for the first time, my name is Jessi Sletten. I'm your postpartum prep coach, helping you feel calm, confident, and prepared for your postpartum experience before birth so that you can have the peaceful and healing fourth trimester you deserve. I'm joined this morning by the lovely Stefanie Adler, who is a nutritionist, a women's hormone and fertility expert, doula, podcast host. She has many hats, so I'm so excited to have you here. Good morning, Stefanie.
Thanks, Jessi. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really excited about today's show because I think, it's something that we're both equally passionate about and that we work with our, pregnant and postpartum parents through. And that's really just something that's interesting when it comes to postpartum wellness and recovery. And it's about utilizing ancestral nutrition and wisdom and knowledge in our more modern, postpartum experiences. And I think it's something that not a lot of people have heard of or are aware of in our culture. So I'm really excited to kind of open that topic up and kind of just expose more people to that. So thank you again for coming on and being willing to share your knowledge. But before we get into that, I'd love to just get to know you a little bit better. So if you could just share a little bit about your journey, how you got into this work, I'd love to hear your story.
Yeah, totally. And just really quick before I jump into my background, it's so amazing, like just to think about our bodies haven't evolved that much from the way that our ancestors lived. And we've just been in this like hyper fast world. So like how returning to that is really just such like the, that our bodies are asking for. Really excited to chat about that. And so a little bit about my background. So I came to nutrition, health, wellness, just this entire world through the need to. I had a lot of digestive issues. My parents say since I was a baby, like as long as truly I can remember. And when I was in like my, I'd call it like 10 to 13 years old. Finally, we were seeing, a gastroenterologist and like trying to figure out what was going on with me. They did all the like big tests and they were like, there's something wrong with you. You have IBS. You have to deal with this your whole life. Here are some medications. They sucked. I actually found this out as an adult that the doctor, because I kept going being like, I still don't feel good. I still don't feel good. There has to be something better than this. From a young age, I knew that I didn't want to settle for a life of just like, okay, well, you're going to have stomach aches all the time. Right. The doctor said to my mom, I have real kids to treat with real problems. Like she's making it up.
Wow.
And
that's terrible. Oh my gosh.
But so anyways, I had this like really crazy experience where I just was not feeling good in my body. The doctors were not being helpful. And at the age of 13, I decided to take matters into my own hands and became really interested in the relationship between food and the body and the way it feels and as a catalyst for health or dis-ease. And after making some dietary shifts that were not recommended by said doctors, obviously, I, within 3 months, resolved issues that had been happening in my body for 13 years. And so just from that really young age, became really aware of that, came back around to it in my early 20s, went and got a second degree in holistic nutrition and became really obsessed during that time with the female body specifically, how magical it is and how so many things are working at the same time. And always knew my path, was to eventually become a mother and really wanted to support that, early on. And so really specialized in everything from preconception nutrition all the way through babies, first year, first foods. And I'm just so passionate about helping mothers in this space.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think it's really telling for a lot of us in this field that, we came into this from our own struggles, right? Because we're like, what's available out there is lacking. It's not like supportive at all to, so many of us out there who are looking for a better solution, a more root-based, solution instead of just treating symptoms or taking medications that cause more problems, but no side effects. Medications have a place for sure, and there's many medications that are necessary, but I think we need to treat it as a more holistic approach where we're looking at the system as a whole and how it all works together. So that's incredible that it was at such a young age for you to be so in tune with your body. That's amazing.
Yeah. And it's just so interesting too about the medication piece. Like I look at my journey and it's never, you can never compare two people to each other, but a
Right.
lot of what had sparked a little bit of like almost fear for me around
Yeah.
fertility and why I decided to specialize in fertility was I had an aunt who I had like a lot of the same issues as, like we had the
Yeah.
same stomach issues, we had the same painful periods, we had all these things. And my
Yeah.
aunt really struggled with fertility. She ended up getting pregnant with both of her babies through in vitro.
Mm.
And she had endometriosis. She had all these things that the doctors were like, oh, well, you're going to have because your aunt did. And I can't help but think that if I at 13 had just been like, okay, I'm going to like accept your, just like give me the medications to cover up the things that are actually happening in my body instead of
Right.
healing it at the root, that my
Yeah.
journey could have looked so different. I mean, when I work with clients, it's like, who are struggling in these ways, it almost never starts now. Like there are
Right.
always the seeds that we can go back and see how there were warning signs, the body trying to talk earlier on. And so I think it's just about like, okay, how do we listen to this woman's body and
Yeah.
help them resolve it at the root?
Yeah. Oh, I completely agree. And really like leaning into that intuitiveness in ourselves. Like if we feel like something isn't right or we know that something isn't working, like trusting that feeling and not just, you know, taking it at face because the doctor is telling us, "Oh, you're making this up." Like, no, no, thank you. Like, there's enough of this. Just the westernized medical field is wonderful in many ways, but especially for women, it can be really, really defeating to bring these problems and just have it be basically ignored or played down when it's like this is affecting my life. Like day to day, like I am struggling and I'm bringing this to you. And instead of getting the help that I need, I am basically told that I'm just making this up and it's heartbreaking. So I think it's really, really important for us to be our own advocates when it comes to our health for sure.
Yeah, it reminds me of that meme that I've seen go around, where it's like the woman's like, her hair is falling out. She's like, like there's like all these things
Yeah.
going on. And she's like on the phone with her doctor and they're like, good news, your labs came back and nothing's wrong. And
Right.
like, that's actually not good news. What I tell people, is like, you are the expert of your own body. And
Yeah.
if the lab work isn't showing that, then you're running the wrong labs, right? And this is why
Yeah.
functional labs are so much more telling and give us so much more information. I've never had a lab come back totally normal without healing
Yeah.
opportunities the first time we're running it for a client. And so it's just
Right.
like showing how the system actually isn't designed to be helpful in that way. It's like you have to be so
Yes.
far gone before
Right.
something comes back abnormal.
Right. Well, and just looking at like the ranges for some of these normal labs, it's mind-boggling. It's like, how can it be that big? Like, no, if you're at the lower end of it and you're still struggling, not feeling well, obviously that's not an optimal level, even if it's normal for this test or whatever it is, and I think it's hard too because the female body and female health has just been so neglected. And so a lot of these tests too are based on things that don't even really make sense for the female body, in my opinion. So it's just like, listen to your gut, listen to your own body, and find ways to optimize what might not be feeling well for you or working well for you, just because it might be considered normal. And in the range of what they say is normal. Because I've found that for myself personally, and for a lot of people that I've spoken to as well. They're like, oh, my labs came back normal. And it's like, even if they're normal, it's not optimal.
And a little tip that I can give people, I mean, this isn't
Yeah.
perfect, so definitely, consult someone, but a little tip
Right.
with people when they're looking at their own labs and everything's coming back normal is
Yeah.
if it's a marker of health. So like a marker, let's say like, your vitamin B or vitamin D levels or, progesterone or like something that is, we want to be a marker of health. You
Yeah.
typically want to be in a like normal range. You typically want to be in the upper 1/3. Whereas for like something that would be like a marker of inflammation or like a marker of dis-ease, you would
Yeah.
want to be in the lower 1/3 of that. And so again, it's not a perfect tell, but I think it can
Right.
also just be an empowering tool for someone to go through and be like, oh, okay, so like this is what they're saying is normal. It is huge. If I broke that
Right.
down into thirds, and this is a marker of health. Where am I actually at? And it can
Yeah.
just give you some empowering information to be like, okay, well, maybe I need to get a second opinion or see someone else.
Yes. No, I love that. That's a really great kind of tip because I think it is overwhelming. Like when you're looking at these test results and you basically don't know how to read hardly any of it. And then you're waiting for the doctor to tell you. And then they get on and be like, everything looks good. And it's just like, that feels yucky. I don't like that. I want to know how I can read my own results and how I can advocate for, better outcomes for myself. So thank you for that tip. That's really, I haven't heard that before. So that's really awesome. Keep that in the pocket. Oh my gosh. Well, this is awesome so far, just kind of touching the surface, because I know that this is such a in-depth topic and there's a lot of things that go into this whole realm of, really knowing and optimizing your own health and understanding and listening to your body and all these things. But one of the things that I know we wanted to touch on today was really how to optimize your nutrition in postpartum and why that's so important. So I'd love to get your just ideas around that topic specifically.
Yeah. Well, and it's so interesting because I talk to a lot of, I'll do a workshop for postpartum moms and I just will test the room and I'll be like, okay, how much of this do you think you're eating? Or tell, everyone write for me, what you had for lunch today, in the chat. And the results are astounding, right? It's this is actually the time when the body needs the most in terms of nourishment, because not only has your body done the incredible job of growing a human for the last 9+ months, right?
Right.
But then if you choose to breastfeed, it's nourishing that whole human. And so the nutritional needs are astounding. And then what happens for a lot of people is they feel totally overwhelmed by postpartum. They weren't prepared for when, what their body needs in terms of nutrition. And then they get really, really depleted. And we'll see a ton of things that come out of that, whether that's inability to, lose the baby weight or just total stress on the body, autoimmune conditions. I mean, it totally depends on the person, but we'll see a lot come out of it, sometimes secondary infertility, et cetera. And so I actually, think that this is the most important focus that a woman having a baby can do, is really thinking about how do I nourish myself postpartum. And when we look at traditional cultures around the world, they all have, what they call a period of confinement or the first 40 days. It varies in different countries. And during this, it's not just laying in bed, it's having someone prepare very specific foods. Again, it varies a little bit by culture, but we see themes throughout.
Yes.
Very nutrient dense foods, usually based in animal fats, very mineral rich. A lot of times, they're utilizing, especially in Asia, seafood, seaweed, things that have all of those trace minerals to replenish and nourish the body.
Yeah.
Even just after a period, we're supposed to be replenishing with trace minerals and iron and all of these things. And so then thinking about how much blood loss, how much we're losing during birth, that period is so important. So So specifically with postpartum nutrition, I mean, also the other thing, especially again, if you're a nursing mom, a lot of this I'll just, specify, but a nursing mom needs way more calories than she ever did during pregnancy.
Right.
An average, I mean, again, it varies person to person a little bit, but 2,500 calories a day. Yeah. And also this is a time where so many people are but I need to lose the weight. And so they restrict and they're not getting enough and their body is just so depleted.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. This alone could be a whole episode around bounce back culture and really understanding mothering the mother and sitting in and looking at all of that nourishment for not just baby, but for mom. And it's hard because I feel like in pregnancy, we're more motivated around what we're eating, right? And it's because baby's inside. And so we're we have to make sure we're getting the right nutrition for our baby. And that can also be challenging because we have all of the nausea that can happen or just food aversions and all these things. And so that in and of itself can add to the depletion when we come into postpartum. But then when we come to postpartum, everything shifts, right? And instead of having the focus be on the pregnant person, it shifts over to baby and everything's about baby. And that is so detrimental in our society. And it's one of the biggest things that I love speaking to people like you about, because I know we're both passionate about. We have to shift that. It has to be where we are centering the birth giver, because if we're not centering the birth giver, everything falls apart from there, and there's so much that's connected to fundamental things like nutrition. And they're easy for us to do, right? It's not it's this complicated thing of knowing exactly what vitamins we should be taking, or, all these things. It's like, it's really going back to basics and really focusing on those nourishing foods. And I'd love to get your opinion on some of your favorite maybe foods for postpartum, because I know I have mine, but I'd love to hear some
Yeah.
of yours.
So my absolute favorite food, and when we're defining postpartum, I mean, I think in one way I'm talking about like the fourth trimester, right?
Yeah.
Like those first couple months after birth, but also like you're still considered postpartum for 2 years after having a
Yes.
baby. I mean, potentially longer. So this
Right.
doesn't actually change so much
Mm-hmm.
after those first, 3 months post
Right.
giving birth, but for this, sake of this conversation, I'm kind of centering it around that. But meat stock is my favorite food
Mm-hmm.
for postpartum. And this is different than bone broth. And I think that's
Okay.
an important distinction, because so often people are like, okay, bone broth, chuck, gonna go back to the
Right.
store, get a bunch of cases of it, and we're just gonna put that in our food. It is not the same thing. Like your meat stock should truly be the consistency of Jell-O. You should be able to
Yeah.
scoop it when it's in the
Mm-hmm.
fridge. And so it's so easy to make, and people spend so much money buying subpar bone broth at the store.
Yeah.
Um, but just take a full chicken once a week, put it in a pot, do 4 cups for every 1 pound of meat. So like if you
Mm-hmm.
have a 3-pound chicken, that would be like 12 cups of water. Let it simmer until the meat is fall off the bone. That's usually like 2.5 hours for chicken. If you were doing something like oxtail, it would be a little bit longer.
Yeah.
And use the broth from that. And then also the chicken is like so nourishing, and so we
Yes.
can have so much food. You can just use that for snacks, things like that. But so
Yeah.
meat stock is my absolute favorite. It's so collagen rich. So it'll help the tissues post-birth
Yes.
strengthen. And it's just so nourishing. Every traditional culture has a version of meat broth or meat stock
Mm-hmm.
that they prioritize postpartum. And also it's very mineral rich. And so we're
Yeah.
really replenishing minerals. It's really the ultimate food. Another one that I love is egg yolks. And
Mm-hmm.
getting, enough of them. And not that egg whites are fine, but egg yolks are
Okay.
really where all of the nutrients are. And so what I'll recommend
Yeah.
people do is they do 2 times the amount of egg yolks to every egg white. So if you're making yourself an omelet, you could do like 2 full eggs and 2 additional egg yolks, and like really
Mm-hmm.
up the nutrient density of that food.
Yeah.
And oysters are my absolute, like, I love them. And I think that's like a food that people are like, okay, like,
Yeah,
how
that's
much
a new one for me. I'm like, yep, bone broth or meat stock, check. Eggs, check. But I'm like, oysters, this is interesting.
oysters are just the highest source of zinc that we
Zinc.
can get in any food. And zinc is
Mhm.
something that gets our body will actually push out in times of stress. And
Yeah.
even if postpartum at its most bliss can be very stressful on the internal system of the body. And so we
Right.
really want to make sure we're getting enough zinc. It also is very supportive for immunity. And then you're also going to be passing it on through your breast milk during a time where a baby is like more vulnerable to,
Mhm.
immune to having like a lower and less reactive immune system. And
Right.
then also full of trace minerals. It's just like such an awesome food. And if you're like, okay, but how am I supposed, I'm not going out for oyster happy hour, right?
Right.
Buy canned oysters in water or olive oil and put
Okay.
them on crackers, and it makes such a good snack. And it's like
Mm.
literally the easiest nursing snack ever. It's just like
Yeah.
opening a can of oysters and putting them on some crackers.
Yeah.
So it's like nice that it's pantry,
Yeah,
like
or shelf stable. Yeah, that's great. Mhm.
so oysters. And then my other favorite postpartum food is liver. And
Yeah.
so and maybe for like the reasons that people know, they're like really
Mhm.
high in iron, right? And so and actually the chicken livers, people don't know this often. Chicken liver is higher in iron and vitamin A than sometimes the beef liver. And so like
Mm.
a lot of times people do like the, beef liver blends, which is fine. And
Mhm. Yeah.
that's the best way for you to do it. But like if you can put on your, meal train, can someone make me a chicken liver mousse? Feel free to hit me up
Mhm.
for my favorite recipe. Happy to share it.
Yeah.
It is, again, makes such an easy snack, like on some crackers when you're nursing, and so nutrient dense. And that vitamin A is going to go so far for
Mhm.
replenishing your fertility and building up your reproductive vital reserves.
Yeah.
So those are some of my favorites. There are more, obviously, but my top 4.
Yeah, no, I love that. And the liver too, this I got from Lily Nichols, which I'm sure you're very familiar with. But I love that she suggests, you can kind of hide those organ meats if there's something where you're like, that does not sound appetizing to me, in like a meatloaf or something like that. And so I always thought that that was a good tip there for getting those organ meats in. But then if you're just like not wanting to eat them, that's a good way to kind of hide them
For sure.
in other food. But I love the oyster tip. I'm always looking for suggestions for shelf stable, because a big part of what I teach my clients is you need to have food ready, available within arm's reach in your postpartum recovery space. So anything that is shelf stable is so helpful, because you don't have to have like a mini fridge or take all these trips downstairs to get stuff from the fridge, or have your family. Obviously would be more beneficial to serve you those foods, but it just makes it like super easy to just grab snacks like that. So
Totally.
I love those tips. That was great.
Yeah.
Okay, so this was the other thing that I really wanted to get your advice on, and that's ways to increase energy, because we all know, even if we haven't had a baby yet and we're pregnant, we're exhausted. Our body is going through so much and pulling so much energy just to grow the baby, and then our body is recovering, after birth from all of our birthing wounds and getting everything back in order in our body. So, what are some of your tips around like really energizing ourselves despite the sleep deprivation that can happen?
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing, like when we talk about ancestral wisdom, we can extend it beyond just nutrition and to talk about things like the way that our ancestors slept with our babies and how we can learn from that, and how maybe that will really help with sleep deprivation. And if we want to go there, I'd love to chat about that more after, because I think it's a huge part of this conversation. But when it comes to energy, and I might ruffle some feathers here, it's not normal to be super tired, even during pregnancy, during postpartum. Okay. And so when we're exhausted, like beyond the first trimester with like some of the like major hormone changes that are happening, if you are so tired, that is your body signaling for help. And usually what I see is more minerals.
Yeah.
So one of my favorite things that I do for myself, that I did for myself during pregnancy and postpartum, that I do for clients during pregnancy and postpartum, is hair mineral analysis tests, because we can get so clear on where the body is nutrient deficient. And so often people are just like taking a prenatal vitamin and being like, okay, I'm covering my bases. And sometimes I see it making the situation worse. And like, because it's so generic and like here, let's throw nutrients at it. Like if someone has copper toxicity and we're putting more copper into their body every day, of course they're going to feel more tired. And we just see so many different examples of how this plays out. But getting more minerals in a food-based form, not in a necessarily a supplement-based form, unless you have that very specific insight into like, okay, I really need more of this, this, and this, and I have too much of this, like where we can see that is going to be the best thing. So one thing that I recommend to all people in this season of life are making adrenal cocktails. Ooh. Are you familiar with adrenal cocktails?
I've heard of them, but I don't really have any great recipes. So I'd love to hear what you have to say about how to put them together.
There are a few different ways to do it. I'll tell you what my favorite way to do them is. But adrenal cocktails, they're alcohol free, but what they are these like fun little mocktails that are really supporting the adrenal reserves. And why this is so important, really quick before I share the recipe, is when we think about giving birth, what does it require a lot of, or at least it used to before there were enough medical interventions to like kind of I can't think of the word, like cancel it out. We require a lot of adrenaline. Okay. Yeah. And so if the body feels like it's not going to have enough adrenaline to give birth, if the body feels like it's so drained of its adrenaline and those adrenal reserves, it will not prioritize libido. It will not prioritize any sort of reproductive health, and it will not prioritize energy, because like that is not the priority if we can barely gather that adrenaline to be able to do this big thing. So I feel like a lot of times postpartum, people will like never fully recover from that if their adrenal are not built up. And this is when energy can be super low. So anyways, adrenal cocktails are a really great way to replenish and nourish those adrenal reserves. So what you use coconut water. I recommend not the kind that comes in the paper box. Those are bound to have like some mold inside. So I would stay away from those. There's like, they come in, I mean, you could actually just get coconuts and break them open. That would be the best thing. But otherwise, like Harmless Harvest is a really great brand. It's pink, doesn't have anything in it but coconut water. So coconut water, orange juice. So the coconut water is really high in potassium, which our body needs so much of during the season of life. Then the orange juice, which is, especially if it's fresh, which has the vitamin C that is so replenishing for the adrenals. And then what
Mhm.
you can do is add a little bit of collagen powder to get some protein and some just stable amino acids in there. A tiny scoop, like a half a teaspoon of cream of tartar, which is basically just more potassium,
Yep.
some sea salt, like Celtic sea salt, Redmond's real salt, something like that, to get some extra sodium, which is really great.
Mhm.
And if you want, like for flavor, you can add some coconut cream to just like make it a little creamy. I don't always do that part, but yeah,
Mhm.
mix it up and drink it. It is so yummy. It tastes like straight up you're on a beach somewhere tropical. Um, when I was pregnant, I was having 2 of those a day for sure. Postpartum, it's a really nice way to just like, wow, I feel like immediately afterwards, you feel energized. The
Yeah.
only caveat I will say is not to do it like on an empty stomach because it can
Mm.
be a little bit sugary and spike your blood sugar.
Yeah.
Uh, so do it like after a meal, or if you're not doing it after a meal, make sure to put that coconut cream in there so that you're
Yeah.
getting fat to keep your blood sugar stable. But having those in your arsenal can be such an energy boosting tip. And then another thing that I really encourage people to think about for boosting energy is stabilizing blood sugar.
Yes.
So
Mhm.
what happens when we're not stabilizing blood sugar is we're on this like roller coaster all day. So then we're like, oh my
Yeah.
God, I'm so exhausted. Let me eat something for energy. Maybe you have a banana, which
Yeah.
most people are going to be like, that's a good choice. But what
Right.
happens is if you have that banana without some fat or any protein with it, it spikes your blood sugar. You feel good for like 30 minutes and then you crash.
Crash.
We're
Mhm.
back on this cycle. And if that blood sugar isn't stable, it basically is the foundation for all energy, metabolic health, and hormonal health in your body. So,
Mhm.
not a stable foundation, you're just going to be stuck like trying to boost your energy and then crashing all day long. So,
Right.
as much as it feels like intuitive to eat the more sugary food or to have that extra cup of coffee, it's actually destabilizing your blood sugar. And so we really want to
Yeah.
stick with things that are fat rich, protein rich. And if you're having a carbohydrate like fruit or, a more starchy carb, like you could think of, potatoes, sweet potatoes, whatever it is,
Right.
or bread, making sure that you have it with adequate fat and protein so that your blood sugar stays stable.
Yes, I think that's a really big one because I know, like, I did not do well with that with my first postpartum or pregnancy, really. I didn't know much about anything, which is what brought me to this work because I had such a bad experience with my postpartum healing and everything. But the difference it made with my second was just incredible. And even now, I'm 4 years out of my last pregnancy, and birth, and I still am like, I have to pair my carbs with either a fat or a protein, or I just like, you know, I crash. So it's such a great thing to be knowledgeable about, and it's really easy to do once you're aware of it because it's like, okay, I could have that banana, but I'm also going to have it with some almond butter, or I'm also going to have it with maybe a hard-boiled egg or something like that, where you're always just trying to find that pair. It makes it easier to have that awareness ahead of time when you're making your choices. So I
Totally.
love that. It's so important for
And
sure.
with that, I mean, like it sounds like such a small thing. You're like,
Yeah.
okay, add fat and protein, like no naked carbs. I mean, and there are other things too, like getting enough protein throughout the day. One way to calculate that, I mean, like the upper limit usually for what I recommend, I mean, you could do more, but like typically a good range for people, let's say you weigh like the amount of pounds of your ideal weight. So let's say before you got pregnant weighed like 125 pounds and that's what you want to get back to,
Mhm.
then like 125 grams of protein, most of that coming from bioavailable animal sources, is like
Mhm.
kind of your aim for protein in the day. And that's a lot.
Right.
Like if you think about
Yeah.
one egg is 6 grams of protein.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
you're not going to get there eating a few hard boiled eggs and scrambled eggs throughout
Right.
the day. So making sure that you're getting enough protein and really combining the like balancing blood sugar and getting enough protein is the thing that I see most of my clients being like within a couple weeks. I mean, we're not talking like 4 months later, you start to feel the benefits. Like within
Yeah.
10 days, 20 days, you're like, whoa, okay, I don't need that afternoon nap the way that I did before. I'm like really starting to feel more energized.
Yeah.
Specifically postpartum, the
Mm.
thing that I did that I found the most helpful, especially after my husband went back to work, because, he had a few weeks off. And so those
Yeah.
few weeks, like he could bring me really like a nice made meal in the morning.
Mhm.
But once he wasn't able to do that anymore, I found the mornings to be the most challenging when it came to stabilizing my blood sugar because
Yeah.
like the baby needed to nurse. Like there felt like just so much to do in the early
Right.
hours of the morning, and really getting 30 grams of protein within that hour of waking can set you up for success for the day, or can like put you just like, I'm trying to keep up if you don't get it.
Right.
So what I did is I would make like 4 pounds at a time of these really yummy breakfast patties.
Mm.
There are like a few different recipes that I use. Some of them were like carrot and cinnamon. Some of them were like apples and cinnamon with chicken or pork or whatever it is that you like.
Yeah.
And like, keeping the fridge stocked with those. And I mean, they're good cold, but like you could literally go to the fridge and pick out 3 of them and be like, okay, I'm getting my,
Yeah.
in the morning without having to do any work. If you
Right.
feel fancy, you can stick them in the toaster oven and warm them up. But like having breakfast already made in a way that is like protein rich
Yes.
is like the best tip I can give my postpartum mamas, because the mornings otherwise tend to get away from you, and then you're playing catch up with your energy and your blood sugar all day.
Yeah, no, I love that suggestion because I think that is so true. And we're coming off of like a fast, right, at night where you're
Yes.
most likely not eating anything. And so you're already kind of struggling with that aspect. And then, yeah, like you said, you just have to, especially if you have more than one, like if you have your baby and you have like toddlers or you have kids that you have to take to school,
Yeah.
like morning is chaos. So the simpler you can make it on yourself, which I think is another point that is important that I always try to make, is prepping these foods is like, it is a game changer. Like the more you can prep having like these meals and things ready ahead of time, the easier it is for you to make those choices, because otherwise you're just going to grab what's available and fast, which a lot of times aren't the greatest choices. So I love having that just stocked fridge. It's like the ideal.
For sure. And
Yeah.
I mean, not everyone, I understand like this is in their budget. And I think there's a lot of different ways to do this. I mean, there are like, you could hire cooking services. A lot of like postpartum, doula companies have like a postpartum food service where like they'll come to your house and prep some things for you. And I think it's just getting really smart about what you're asking. And if that's not an option, there are like food deliveries, like mama meals is really great, but also like leaning on friends and community. One of these ancestral pieces, right? No one was doing this in isolation. Like we were all in villages and in community. And I never go to someone that and this is probably because we have this knowledge, but I never visit someone with a new baby without bringing food, right? Like there has to be something. And I think so often people just don't know what to make, or they like, oftentimes if you're getting something that you are not like excited about, all you have to do is, and so what I did before I had a baby is I literally made like a postpartum support packet, and it had like recipes in it that I approved and that I loved. And it was like, if anyone wants to come visit us and feels called to bring us food, we make one of these.
Yes, I love that, because I think we're afraid sometimes to be specific or to, kind of ask of our friends and community certain things, right? But the reality is they would love for you to tell them what would be most helpful. People want to be helpful, right? And so it's like, they don't know. They would rather have the direction, and it's going to benefit you and your baby in the long run to get what you actually need. So don't be afraid to ask and be very specific about what you want on your meal trains, or if you're prepping ahead of time. I love like the postpartum meal prep parties that some mamas are having, and just doing those kind of things that brings in your community, brings in your support social wise, but it also helps stock your freezer with things that are going to benefit your healing and your energy.
Too, with I would say like the last like 6 weeks or 8 weeks of pregnancy, is once a week, whatever I was making for dinner, if it would freeze well, and I would make sure that I planned something that would freeze well, I would double the recipe and immediately put half of it in the freezer.
Yep.
So, I mean, by the first 3 weeks, we almost didn't have to cook at all, even without people really bringing us food, because we had a freezer stocked of stuff that I was just making for dinner, the last few weeks of being pregnant. And that's like such an easy thing to do. And it sets you up for so much success down the line.
Yeah, because you're already cooking it. You're already preparing it for that night or that week. And it's like, you might as well just double the recipe and then you're done. You don't have to spend time in the kitchen.
And an extra 15 minutes now and save an extra like hour and a half in the future. Yeah,
exactly. Yes. Yes. Prep is your friend for sure. All right. Well, I would love to kind of just get some of your ideas and tips to beyond the nutrition. So we kind of talked a little bit about that. You referenced it around this ancestral knowledge and wisdom and practices. It's really more of a holistic approach to postpartum healing and mothering the mother. And I'd love to get some, other ideas of what we can apply in our postpartum that we can learn from some of these other cultures.
Yeah. Yes.
So much.
feel like it makes me so happy thinking about it and sharing it. And on the other hand, like, it makes me so sad because I think
Yeah.
so often, like, we as a society are so just disconnected from what
Yes.
feels true. But motherhood gives us this opportunity to, like, whoa, like, that mother's instinct, like, in,
Right.
we can ignore the noise.
Yeah.
I think that social media is awesome in the sense that, like, it shows someone else bed sharing or someone else to, not sleep train or whatever it is, that was like, oh my God, but also on the other side of the spectrum, I feel like it exposes us to so much
Yes.
information that it's hard to really interact with what is true and what is not. And so
Yeah.
something I really encourage any postpartum, if you weren't getting advice from, if you were not getting advice from the lactation consultant and the expert and your friend who had a baby out 2 months before you, whatever it is, what
Right.
would feel like the right thing to do?
Yeah.
Like, I feel very fortunate that before I entered the world of motherhood, just through my own, like, wellness world, I really built up this mantra of, like, what other people think is none of my business, and I'm just gonna do what feels right for me, and, like, that's the end of it. But if
Yeah.
you were to have that mantra, what would
Yeah.
you? And by following that, I mean, that's how I chose to parent, and, like, to follow that, I feel like peers. Like, I remember I joined a new mothers group at a
Yeah.
local center here.
Mm-hmm.
We would all go around and share how we were feeling, and it was like everyone would be like, "I'm so overwhelmed. I'm so tired. I'm so this. I'm so that." And we'd get to me, and I was like, "I'm doing awesome. Like, I feel really good." Like.
Right.
But I think it's, like, important to share that is possible. And, like, out of
Right.
this group of 10 women, I was the only one bed sharing, and, like,
Right.
I was also the only one who was getting as much sleep as I needed every night.
Right.
And when we think about, like, how did I come to that decision around bed sharing? Well, I thought about, like, how did we do this for thousands and thousands of years?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the truth. Like, that is the way that humans sleep together, and, like,
Right.
or maybe there is all this you can look into about, like, sleep, safe bed sharing, safe
Yeah.
co-sleeping. And it might not be for everyone, and that's okay. But, like, just recognizing that so many of these things, like, my son didn't take a bottle, and that's a privilege, and that, like, I'm able to nurse him whenever I want. But I feel like so often people are like, I have to pump so I can fill up my freezer, so I can do this, and the baby has to take
Right.
a bottle. And then they have breastfeeding issues,
Right. Yeah.
Like, I think so often if we can just truly trust, like, what is the most biologically normal, what feels the most right for us to do right now, and lean
Yeah.
into that, it's most likely what our ancestors were doing.
Right.
And it's most likely going to lead to the best outcomes for mom and for baby.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's kind of my feelings around that.
Yeah. I love that. And I think it's important too to allow yourself time to learn your baby, right? Because I feel like I have two kids, right? And they could not be more different than each other. And it's just like really understanding that babies are their own humans from day one, right? So like what works for some babies might absolutely be horrible for yours, and that's okay. So it's just like leaning into that understanding and learning about your baby, what works for your baby, what works for you, what's helping with, all of that. Like you said, kind of tuning out the noise and really trying to lean into your experience and what your baby needs is one of the best things I ever did a second time around, because I was one of those moms who was like, I have to be prepared for everything. I'm going to like take all the classes, listen to all the experts. And half of what I had learned did not work for my son because he was a highly sensitive child. He's neurodivergent. So of course I didn't know any of that when he was a baby, but it was like, none of this is working. Why? And then I was like internalizing that as a failure on my part when that wasn't true, and it's really hard because we're really hard on ourselves as women and as moms, especially. And so I love your advice about tune out the experts and tune in to what your body and your mama heart and your baby is telling you instead of relying on the outside stuff. It's great to have advice and to have those experts to refer to, but a lot of times we just need to learn along the way with what works for us and our baby.
And trust yourself. Like, I feel
Yeah.
like so much of this is a separate conversation too, but like so much of the messaging that women get starting at the beginning of pregnancy is that like, you can't trust yourself. You can't trust your body. This is something that needs to be managed from the outside, from experts. And like, if that was the case, the human species like would not be here,
Right.
like it's just not
Yeah.
true. And if
Right.
you turn that around and you say, I am the expert of my own body, just like we were talking about before, I am the expert of my baby, and I'm the expert of like knowing what's right for us, and become your own expert and trust yourself more than you trust other people. Wow. Will your experience change, right? Like,
Yeah.
trust your baby to tell you what they need. Trust yourself to be able to listen.
Yeah.
And really lean into that mother's intuition. And I mean, it sounds like you really had the opportunity to do that with your kid and your son. And I think that so many women would benefit from that. Like, there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with your baby if they don't want to be set down,
Right.
right? Like, that is a biologically normal thing. But if you don't trust yourself or trust your baby that he's telling you something that you need and that you need to wear him all the time for all his
Right.
naps, like, why isn't he sleeping in his bassinet?
Right.
Like, there's just going to be struggle, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think on the other end of that too is, if I think the intuition thing is also something that we have right away, but sometimes it is a learned thing, because for me
Yeah.
too, it was like, oh, I just thought I would automatically know how to do everything once my baby was here. And then when I didn't know certain things and I was feeling really overwhelmed by like, this isn't working and all of that, I also felt really bad, and I'm like, maybe I'm not a good mom. Maybe I wasn't, meant to do this, and all these things that started internally rolling around in my mind, and I always like to tell moms, like, mothering in some ways is so internally driven and natural, but also it's a learned experience. Your baby's learning how to live and survive on the outside world. You're learning how to help them do that and how to heal your body and how to support your body. So it's this kind of beautiful mix of, listen and tune in to what your intuition is telling you, and also give yourself some grace, because it's a learning process for sure.
I mean, like, I think about breastfeeding, and I
Yes.
had this like totally idyllic vision of what breastfeeding
Mhm.
was going to be like. And it is like the most natural thing in the world, but that doesn't mean it's easy and that it comes
Right.
naturally. Right.
Right.
Um, and going back to that ancestral wisdom, like, there's something to be said for, I don't know about you, Jessi, but I mean, I could count on one hand the amount of times I had been close to someone nursing. I
Oh,
mean, I didn't
yeah.
see people breastfeeding in public or whatever, like that. I'd like sat
Mhm.
next to someone and been like, "Oh, you're breastfeeding your baby," maybe 2 or 3 times before I ever
Right.
had a baby. Whereas historically, this would have been something that we've like grown up just knowing
Yeah.
about it being more often. And I actually, when my son was 3 months old, it was the Jewish high holidays, and we went to services, and Orthodox Jews often have a lot of children, and so the age
Yeah.
range is really big. And so, I asked this woman, like, "Is there a place I can go nurse the baby?" Just to be respectful of, like, kids, et cetera. Normally, I would just, like, nurse wherever I was, but I felt a
Right.
little. She brought her 11-year-old daughter over, and she said, "Can you go show Stefanie somewhere to nurse the baby?" 1, at 11 years old. No, if someone had said, "Nurse the baby," I would have had
Yeah.
no idea what they were talking about.
Right.
No, this little girl know what I was talking about, but she totally understood, like, my needs. She was like, "Oh, well, this room has, like, a really good chair where you could prop up your arm, and this room has
Yeah.
lay down." And it's because she's the youngest of 7 kids. She has multiple
Mhm.
siblings who are all nursing their babies now, and she's
Yeah.
around it. Like,
Right.
how different would this be if we were, like, in a community where this was something that was so normalized that, like, from the time we were 11 years old, we were like, "Oh, okay, when you're nursing the baby, it helps to have this, and if you have this issue."
Right.
Foreign to us right now.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's that nod back to the, village of support, and just being surrounded by mothers who have gone before us, who could support us in the ways that we needed, is just not here in our culture automatically for a lot of us. And so it's like finding those, supports is so important, and really building your village and curating that village in a way where you're finding the right people to support you in the ways that you need it is so, so important. It's just one of those things that I think is a must before baby even gets here. Because when baby's here, you're going to be overwhelmed enough. And then trying to be like, who can help me learn to breastfeed? Like, you're just like, baby's crying, it's hungry, I need to feed him. You're not going to sit there and research who you can reach out to. So it's best to have kind of an idea. And if you don't need those resources, that's fine too, but at least you have them lined up ahead of time. It's so important.
Something I wish I had done and that I did do for a friend before, like once my son was around the same age, like 3 or 4 months old, I went to visit a friend and facilitate her mother's blessing for her. And when I was nursing, so she was like a month out from giving birth. And I said to her, come sit next to me and watch like how he's latching, watch how I'm like, I like encouraged her to literally like sit and not just like sit with me while I'm breastfeeding, but like get up in there and like, look at this. And she was like, I remember her being like, wow, he's like really on the areola. Like, it's not just the nip, like she was learning so much.
Yeah.
And like, I would honestly, anyone here who has not already breastfed, who's preparing for, postpartum and having a baby, find someone in your community, whether that's a friend or reach out to the La Leche League and find someone local and just say, hey, I'm this many weeks out from the baby. I want I come experience that with you. And not any nursing mom, but I feel like most moms are going to be like, oh yeah, come on over.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we've been there. We've been the mom who's like, I don't know what I'm doing. Is there anybody who can help me? So we all we have to be that village for each other.
Consultants can be great. And like that, I also think it's a good idea to have, someone's phone number on that, so that you can bring them in, but it's not the same thing as like sitting with someone and them just showing you and them talking to you about, what it should feel like or whatever it is. And so, I mean, I wish I had done something like that. And I think that's a really great way to like bring in the village ahead of time.
Yes. Oh, I love that tip. That's a really great tip. And this time has flown by because we've had so much that we've covered and it's been such a great episode, but I'd love any last minute things you want to say, or at least let us know how we can connect with you on the big old internet world where we can kind of stay in touch.
I guess the last thing that I would want to say, and I kind of alluded to it before, but this time of your life is not supposed to suck. Like it is supposed to be beautiful. And if it's not, that's okay. Like it's also not that you're doing something wrong or that, something is wrong with you, but it also maybe means that your body needs more minerals. You need to be nourishing yourself differently and it gets to be good. Like I encourage all of my clients, but especially, people in the season of life to play the game of like, show me how good it can get. And if you need support getting there, that's not a problem. Like that's okay. But just, you're not supposed to be super tired. You're not supposed to have all of these, issues that if you're feeling in your body. So trust that your body is made for this and born for this. And like, you can get there, even if it doesn't feel like that right now. Because it's just like the most exciting thing. I'm thinking specifically of one client, and she, after giving birth to her baby, like several months later, sent me this message, and she was like, I'm having such a different experience than every single one of my peers, and I'm so good at it, right? Like I think it's, not many people are having this experience, but it is possible for you. Mainly focus on your minerals and your nutrition. Share with your baby.
Yes, absolutely.
With me, I do hair mineral analysis tests for people. I love supporting mamas that are pregnant and getting ready to have this really huge experience and get to feel really good through it. Social media, Instagram, my favorite people. So StefanieAdlerWellness.com. Stefanie is with an F. And then also my website, StefanieAdler.com, is a great way to learn more about my offerings. But yeah, I would love to just be in touch and be a village, even if it's online.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. This is amazing. I am so happy that we were able to have this discussion, and I really appreciate you spending the time and your wisdom and just sharing all this with us. So thank you again, Stefanie. I appreciate it. And just as a reminder, the show can also be heard on the Spanglish Radio Network. Please check out spanglishworld.ca for all the news and programming. Spanglish World, watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and we will see you all next week. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jessi.